Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, personal development coach, HeartMath practitioner, dog photographer, and entrepreneur. In this podcast, I share tools, strategies, and amazing guest interviews to help you improve your mindset and your well-being with a sprinkle of fun and probably some mention of dogs along the way. So without further ado, let's squeeze the day. Welcome to episode 12 of the podcast. Today, my guest is Denise Arnoudse, and we're going to be talking about rewriting your brain for success through the use of affirmations. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Denise. So Denise Arnoudse is an ADHD and anxiety business coach. She helps women with ADHD and anxiety stop the overwhelming chaos driving their businesses and, let's be honest, their lives, and helps them to create a successful, purpose-filled business with a balanced life alongside. Denise is passionate about this because this is her. She's a business owner who is passionate and intense and purpose-filled with a family, and she loves creating memories and adventures with them. She's ambitious, and she just wants it all every day. Oh, and she also has ADHD and anxiety. So Denise spent years going from one coaching program to another, wondering why the strategies that were being shared weren't working for her. Then one day, she realized that these programs weren't made for someone with ADHD and anxiety. And she spent some time researching, testing, and implementing strategies that worked for her brain. And now she loves sharing strategies and tips with her audience and spreading the word that ADHD and anxiety is perfect for a business. You just need to learn to work with it and not against it. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you for having me, Emma. I'm so excited to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about using affirmations to rewire your brain for success, but we're not talking about kind of woo-woo affirmations. We're talking about quite a practical, tried and tested approach to using affirmations, which I'm really excited for this conversation. But first, I'd like to know what spurred you into starting to use affirmations in the first place for your business.
Absolutely. So one thing was before I owned the coaching business, I was in the corporate world. And in the corporate world, I received lots of feedback from people, and I received, positives, sometimes negatives, but I always received that feedback that I could work with. And when you have ADHD, a lot of times we thrive off of being told we're doing good. We get a dopamine hit. We're very driven by these external affirmations. Well, once you leave the corporate world, the affirmations were disappearing. And I figured out that I was really struggling because I no longer was receiving that critical feedback that my brain needed. And so it took me a little while to realize that this was a missing critical piece, that my self-talk was not as positive as I wanted it to be. So I began experimenting with affirmations. Once more, like you said, I'm not a woo-woo person. I have a math background. and the idea of manifest your success, like that just makes me roll my eyes. And I know that many of your listeners probably can attest to that same feeling of, oh my gosh, no.
Yeah, totally. And I think also the other piece with that is, I think what comes to mind for a lot of people with affirmations is having read The Secret, and you can just think it into being, and and affirmations like I'm a multimillionaire, and unless you are actually a millionaire, it's quite a big stretch to go from that. And then we set ourselves up to fail. And then I think that's the piece when people say, oh, affirmations, they're stupid. They just don't work. So this is why I'm really intrigued with your very scientific brain approach to this.
Yes. So I began experimenting with affirmations because, especially with ADHD and anxiety, without those dopamine hits, I really struggled to stay focused and not get discouraged when things weren't going the way I wanted them to go. If things weren't happening as quickly as I wanted them to happen. It's what you said. I was in other coaching practices, and without those dopamine hits of affirmations, I was always at the whim of my either the dopamine hit of an affirmation externally, or I was in the pits of not getting it. For example, if you show up online and you put you actually put yourself out there and put the energy out there, and then nobody says anything.
Yep.
That is really painful, especially if you have ADHD and anxiety, because the energy level that you put in, you didn't get the dopamine hit from it.
Yeah.
So it became really challenging. And I was living off of whether or not people were responding.
Yeah.
And that's not a way you can run your business, because some days are going to be okay. Some days are not going to be okay.
Yeah.
But your business needs to be consistent, whether or not you're okay all the time. And I mean, that is relevant for everybody. We shouldn't be running off of our highs and lows. We need to be running fairly stable. And so what I found was, how do I keep myself getting some dopamine hits without needing to go somewhere else and get them from somewhere else? And I began experimenting with affirmations. Affirmations to me are a little different than what I grew up thinking they were. They're not just like praises that like, "Ooh, Denise, you are really good at this." They're not just a praise. They're the belief in something that I want so badly to either happen or to believe. And I'm trying to move towards it. The affirmations I use they help you believe that something is possible, something that you badly desire to happen. And so, for example, I'm a mom. One of the things that is really hard when you have little kids is being present, being kind all the time, and so being patient. That's another one. And I kind of stole this off of another coach that I just dearly loved. She's always saying, "I'm a patient, present, and kind mom." Well, I think a lot of moms may not feel that way. It doesn't feel that way. It's really hard to you want to feel this way, but you don't feel this way. So why should you say this to yourself, that I am something that I don't feel? It's because you shouldn't be telling yourself, "Well, I'm a terrible mother," because then you'll just beat yourself down and eventually you're going to stop trying. So these affirmations help you to stay focused on, I really want this to happen. It's not about perfection. It's not about like, eventually I will never need to say this again. Some of them you may get there, but like this one, I'm a patient and present mom. That one, you may never get to where you have to stop saying it. You may hold on to it, because what you're going to be doing is you're keeping it in the front of your mind so that you give yourself grace to try to be patient, to try to be present, to try to be kind.
Yeah.
But
what I get from that when you're talking, and this is quite similar to what a HeartMath technique of almost telling yourself that that's the feeling and the feeling you aspire to, it gives you a feeling to shift into. And I think patient, kind, and present are three very uplifting, positive, and nice, soothing feeling emotions.
Yeah.
And if you're in a moment of stress with small children who you actually just want to sort of bang their heads together and shut them in a cupboard, nobody do that. Don't follow me for parenting tips. Never done that. Okay. Aspiring for positive emotions like that breaks a state of negativity. So to your point about saying, if you're telling yourself you're a terrible parent, A, you're constantly looking for the negative in what you're doing. B, you're putting yourself in a mood that is negative. It's going to be giving off a negative energy. It is probably going to make your children behave worse because, let's face it, little people are very intuitive when it comes to picking up people's moods and picking up on energy. And it's an affirmation that has power to shift your state and quite possibly shift the state of the little creatures that you are managing as well. So I can see why this is really useful. And I think this is the big difference with how you're talking about using affirmations versus the example I gave of I'm a multimillionaire. I know I'm not, sadly. Sorry, folks. Yes. I know I'm not. And it doesn't feel very nice when you say it. It doesn't make me want to get up and send 500 emails out. It makes me just want to go, do you know what? I'm going to stop for the day because I'm not there. I see how this would be really, really, really useful.
Yes. And one of the things, we talked about rewiring your brain. Well, the aspect of that is, our brain has think of it as, I'm thinking of the old Westerns where you have the trails that have been either A, you're blazing a new trail, or B, you're on a well-worn path. So your brain's kind of the same. The more that you go along a path, the more likely your brain is to go along that path because it gets easier and easier. So if you're telling yourself, I'm patient, present, and kind, your brain will start, the more times you tell yourself that, the more your brain will go there because it's a well-worn, easy path for it to follow. And if you think about this with anything, like any habit, it makes sense. Your brain follows habits that you've had for a while. If you're trying to create a new habit, it's not going to be overnight. So that's the same thing with affirmations.
Yeah.
You have to practice them.
Yes. And I think that's the point, isn't it? The brain tends to take the path of least resistance, doesn't it? And this is the hardest bit at the beginning is reinforcing that new neural pathway. And I love the example you've given, like a Western, and I'm a very visual person, so you've got the well-worn trail where everybody's been down, and then blazing a new one. We don't know what's down there, not so easy, but once you get going, you start weed whacking. It's all good.
Exactly.
Could you share an example of an affirmation you have used or one of your clients has used to create success in their business? We've got that great example you've used for state shifting with parenting. I mean, that state, emotional state shifting affirmation is relevant to anybody, actually. And I think with the business piece in mind, can you share an example of an affirmation that you've used in business that has taken you from kind of A to B and what the result was that you got?
Yes. I have enough energy for my business, my family, and myself. For me, that one really keeps in mind that I have enough energy for what's important in my life, and I don't have to sacrifice in any realm. So I don't have to feel guilty for focusing on my business because I do have the energy to focus on my family too. And I don't have to sacrifice myself either. I can do that as well. Another one I love to do is I can prioritize what's most important to me today. I love that one because then you don't have to beat yourself up at the end of the day. Like if you didn't finish all of your to-dos, I prioritized what was most important today. Letting go of those to-dos that didn't get done because you prioritized what was most important. So you can let go. You already did the best you could. And I don't have to feel guilty that I didn't have more energy, more time, more whatever to do more because I did it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a really nice way of just reframing, because I think a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, are very hard on ourselves. Something I'm working on. I have another friend who's an integral coach, and she often reflects back to me, you're using language that's really quite vicious towards yourself. Would you know?
Oh, I love that. The whole point of an affirmation is to help you show up every day. So if multimillionaires helping you to show up, it wouldn't for me, like you said, it kind of beat myself down. Maybe it's working for those people. Instead, you want to make sure your affirmation is something that you feel is achievable. And not only that, but helps you to show up and not feel guilty about. So let's say you are really working for your first client, let's say, because, you know, we've all been there. That is a really hard state to get in. And you can feel really stuck for quite a while there if you haven't had a client and you wonder whether or not it's working. For that person, I would say my message is magnetically drawing my first client to me today.
Yeah.
Because it's reminding them that the only thing they can control is putting their message out there and trusting and believing that it's resonating with their ideal client. You still have to do the work,
yes,
but it bridges that, like, I'm speaking into the void and nothing's happening.
Yeah. And I think that is a very hard place to be when you're, like you've said, it's interesting that you shared, you have been in a space where you have been seeking external validation. I think it's something a lot of people do. How many likes did my post get? How many saves did my post get? And I think we can become so obsessive with what's the reach, because that's what we're taught. You know, we're in this world of competition, and you've got to keep showing up, and it's just push and strive. And I think sometimes it's okay to say, well, I put a post out, and I would say that is an invitation to say, like you've said, where can I validate myself? And I think this is where these affirmations you're using come in, because you're using them to self-validate, because it's exhausting seeking external validation, and you're always at the mercy of external factors making you happy, which is you're never going to succeed with that. And I would say that's an invitation to say, well, what else can I do to actually make sure, what else can I do in my marketing of my business that's not just showing up on Instagram? Because there's 20 other pieces you could be doing that actually probably have more control over.
And Emma, that is actually the whole thing I coach over. Like the affirmations are the piece of just actually helping you to shift your mindset so you do show up. But then, like, there are other pieces that are really big. For example, especially in the business world, but I mean, honestly, these are things you can apply to all areas of life. We are often, without realizing it, setting ourselves up for failure by creating goals around things we cannot control. It is a constant.
Yes. Could you say more about that?
Absolutely. You know, like you already said about when I show up on Instagram and I want to see how many likes I get, maybe your goal, without realizing it, was I'm going to create a story or a reel that gets however many likes. Well, you don't have control over that at all. So you can put in as much effort as you want. Your control has been handed over to others. And that doesn't feel very good.
Nope. And I think you are, again, you're then at the mercy of things you can't, like you said, you're at the mercy of things you can't control. Your mood is at the mercy of things you can't control. And when we are driven by things we can't control, if we get a bajillion likes on a post, super. We keep showing up, we don't get any likes on a post, or, you know, I one big frustration I have with Instagram is if you put a post out and the only interaction you get is from some nitwit who said, oh, check your DMs, and they're trying to sell you something, and you just think, do you know what, please could you just go away? Perhaps not as politely as that. And because and I think that for me is even more soul destroying, because you think, I've created this content, I've shared this, and the only response I've got is from somebody who's actually trying to take from me. I find it very infuriating. And when we're at the mercy of external things, it drives how much we can or can't do, or how productive we are or aren't. And I've started to look at, with social media, the reframe I've done with that, because you have got to keep showing up, you have got to keep marketing, is to just be curious about it. If this helps anyone who's sitting in the same boat with this, and looking at it, and you're able to get a bit of a gauge of what time of day works for posting, what sort of posts are people resonating with, what topics am I talking about that people seem to enjoy? Maybe I could go there. And I think if you're able to reframe it and actually look at it from a lens of curiosity rather than validation, it takes the emotionality out of it entirely. And that's something that's been really, really helpful for me. Otherwise, we set ourselves up for complete misery.
Absolutely. I call it my CEO persona versus my employee persona. Because for me, the visual of a CEO who is, if you think about a CEO, they're the people who are coming up with the vision, their dreams. They're the ones creating goals. They're also the ones who need the business to make money, and they are driving that side. But the employee side is the doer. The one who is just being assigned tasks to create things for the CEO. And what I tend to do, because I really, for my ADHD brain, I really have to separate these two. I create my CEO goals. CEO goals are usually things you cannot control. Like, I want my business to be this successful. That's something I can't control. I take my CEO goals, break them into the tasks, and those tasks turn into tasks for my employee. My employee now has its marching orders that are goals that only focus on things I can control. How am I going to get this much money? Well, the goals are going to be around maybe how many posts am I doing? What kind of content? How much time am I going to spend interacting with people? What are those goals I have? And so when you separate the two, the employee now, if you're hitting all the marks, great. Now you've done it. And I keep these separated for quite a while because, like Emma, you already said, the information you get back, sitting with it and being curious, you need the information though to be able to analyze it. And that's the CEO's job, not the employee's job. That's the CEO. And so making sure to separate those. And I mean, I actually have affirmations for each persona. I have them recorded for each persona because I need to keep them separated so that I mentally can show up.
I think what you've just shared about being able to split your entrepreneur self into two personas is so useful, because I think we often get very emotionally caught up in the tasks we're doing. And I think there's huge value in being able to say, okay, today I am just in doing mode, and I've got a task list and I'm going to complete it. And on another day, I'm in creating mode, I'm in analyzing mode, I'm in goal setting mode. And I like what you've said about the CEO is the one who sets the goals and decides on the action steps, and the employee persona is the one who goes out and takes the action and doesn't sit questioning all the time, is the action working? Do people like this? Am I okay? Am I validated? And I think that's such a powerful way of approaching business ownership, because it is hard being an entrepreneur. It's so difficult. Like you said, you come from corporate where you have a job to do and you get feedback immediately. Either you've done a great job or you haven't. And if you haven't, here's what we need you to do instead. you're flying in the dark as an entrepreneur. Who knows sometimes what's happening? And often we take action and it takes a while of taking that action for the results to show up. And you have to keep the mindset strong to keep showing up and keep pivoting. And I always think of, when I use the word pivot, I always think of that scene in Friends when they're carrying the couch up the stairs. I've got a sticker somewhere with it on, with pivot. But that's what it is the whole time as an entrepreneur. It is a case of looking at stuff and going, this is not working. What else can I try? And I think it's what you've shared is brilliant. Could you share an example of a CEO affirmation and an example of an employee affirmation for me? Well, me and
yes.
Everyone who's listening.
Yes. A CEO affirmation is something like, my success is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I am totally using my former coach, her name is Anna Rapp. You should go follow her. She's wonderful and amazing. That is her affirmation. Want to give her credit, props for that. An employee affirmation is, I can honor my CEO tasks, or I will fulfill my task today and that's enough. They're always going to be around, like, so the CEOs can be more around the ideas to encourage you to be that dreamer, to think big and to be excited for the dreamer side. The employee tasks are always going to be around, like, I don't need to analyze this. I don't need to question right now. I just need to show up, do the tasks, and it's okay to do that and not worry about it, because I feel like most of us it is worrying to be like, but what if these posts aren't doing so well? Well, then you start pivoting really quickly before you can even see, is it working or not? And the only way that you can pivot in a way that is honoring your goals is to give it enough time to see the data. Like you said, Emma, what time of day is working best? What posts got the most likes? It gives you the data to be able to see what's resonating. But if you don't try different things and you don't give it time, which most of us don't, because you're scared. And that's the problem with not separating the personas. You get scared and you're more likely to pivot faster. If you give it a little bit of time, though, and honor the process, you're more likely to succeed because you're able to get the data and observe it from the CEO's perspective.
Yeah. And I think this ties in beautifully with where your state shifting affirmations come in, that you're able to use the power of how you talk to yourself to be able to give yourself a bit of patience. It's okay for this to take a bit of time. It's okay for me to wait this out. And I think that's the ability to be able to, and what I hear from this and the way you're using them is almost an emotional regulation tool. So we don't get into a crazy anxiety spiral. And especially with you dealing with ADHD and anxiety, it can be very easy, I think, to get into an anxiety spiral when something doesn't appear to be working immediately, because we all want instant gratification, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's such a power. What you've shared today and in our conversation is it's such a powerful way of using those affirmations to just calm yourself enough to say, can we just be present for a minute with this and allow it to unfold. And I think that's so powerful. And I know from my experience of 20 years of being an entrepreneur, is being able to emotionally regulate is so powerful, because it's hard. It's hard. It's really hard. And I think what you've shared today, some really, really powerful tools and takeaways for people, whether they run a business or not. You've shared some brilliant tools, but for business owners in here, we've learned some powerful tools to be able to kind of calmly take stock and not, go running in a completely different direction. So thank you for sharing all of that. This has been I've really enjoyed our conversation, and there's some really valuable takeaways from here. Denise, where can people listening find you, find out more about your work, and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Well, you can go to the ADHDbusinessowner.com. That's my website that you can join us and learn more about how you can either work with me or join. We have a free Facebook community. You can follow me on Instagram, which is technically Denise, or you can friend me on Facebook, Denise Arnoudse. I'm there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Just whatever platform you love, basically, I'm there for you.
I will share your various links in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you. And thank you again, Denise. I found this really valuable. I've got a lot of takeaways from our conversation today. So thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Emma. It was so much fun.
Amazing. Thanks, folks. And thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please share with your friends, and be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. To find out more about my one-on-one coaching, please visit my website, which is emmaobriencoach.com. And remember, folks, when life gives you lemons, you can always choose another fruit. See you next time.